So I have to say, this is like it's one of my favorite gospels actually, because it, it's, this story probably is one of the most poignant transformation stories in the life of Jesus. What it really makes it interesting is that in Matthew, there's three major metanoia moments in Jesus' life. And what's really interesting is all three of those moments are facilitated by conversations with women. It's very interesting that it that perspective often gets lost in the history of Christianity, right? Like we didn't get that reflection very much. The three major transformational moments in Matthew's gospel are Mary and the wedding feast at Cana, where Mary says to Jesus, "You need to change," and he says, "Well, it's not time yet." She said, "You need to change the water into wine. You need to make wine." And the Samaritan woman at the well, she tells him she's not even supposed to be talking to him, and she's not supposed to be talking to her. And she ends up being the one who actually transforms the whole town. And the Canaanite woman or the Syro-Phoenician woman, it depends upon the translation that you have of Matthew's gospel, but Syro-Phoenician and Canaanite mean the same thing. So I think it would help to put a little bit of this into context. If you remember Noah and the flood, right? Noah had two sons, Ham and Shem. Not that this makes a lot of difference, but it really does. So Ham's lineage was the lineage of the Canaanite, okay? And Shem's lineage was Moses and Joshua and consequently the house of David, Abraham, all of that. So the Israelites come from the Shem's line, and the Canaanites come from Ham's line. Canaanites were the ones who were in the quote-unquote promised land, and the Israelites are the ones who invaded the promised land, right? So the Israelites conquered the Canaanites, and they did it in a not so nice way, right? So there's a lot of violence there, and there's a lot of distrust and a lot of hate between the Canaanites and the Israelites. So for a Canaanite woman to approach Jesus and ask him anything would have automatically caused a big rift for her, because she shouldn't be talking to him, and for him because he shouldn't be talking to her. So there was a mutual struggle going on here already right off the bat, just historically. So you have these two issues going on, and you have this request by her. And she was determined, no matter what, she was determined to find healing for her child. I think that is so powerful, right? Because as a mom, you'll do anything. As a dad, you'll do anything, right, to protect your child or to find healing or something for your child. She doesn't quit, no matter what, even though it puts her outside of her community and it might jeopardize Jesus' status in his community. She keeps after him, and she won't let go. She won't stop. The interesting thing, too, is that Jesus doesn't send her away. The disciples say, "Get rid of her." And he says, "No, I'm going to engage in this conversation with her." And it also proves that there was a real bias in Jesus' life. I'm sorry, but Jesus was really racist. And this is the first example of it that we have in Matthew's gospel. It was this woman who transformed his position toward the Canaanite people, and consequently his position toward all of it. Because the very last, if you remember, Matthew's gospel has the story of the final coming, and it's the separation of the sheep and the goats. And his quote to the disciples is, "Go forth and baptize all nations in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit." Baptize all nations. That wasn't what he started off with. He started off with only the house of Israel. And he ended with all nations, and it was because of her. She's the one that transformed it. It's one of the most human pictures of Jesus, and he calls the woman and her people dogs, which was really an insult. Right? That's not just a little insult. That's like, that's a B word in our language, insult. That's how drastic it is, right? And he shows this preference toward his own ethnic and religious heritage, but she is persistent, and she will not stop. The scope of Jesus' ministry was expanded simply because of her. And I think there's two lessons that we can walk away with from this gospel. Number one, I think this lesson, that humility is essential in our lives. Humility involves being open to new perspectives and new ideas, right? And in this passage, Jesus has one idea about what his ministry should be. And it was only through his own humility that he was able to see, wow, maybe there is more. Maybe I do need to be attentive to more people than what I was thinking I needed to be attentive to. Had she not confronted him, had she not challenged him, he wouldn't have been there. He wouldn't have done it. He actually shifts this whole thing, this whole conversation away from dehumanizing, calling them dogs, to being human. Because he ends his last conversation as, woman, your faith has brought your salvation. Your faith has made your daughter whole. So all of a sudden he addresses her as a person rather than a dog. That's a major shift in his life. The second thing second lesson is that racism has a long history. And that history also is woven throughout our faith journey in Christianity. Christianity has been used to foster and continue racism at all kinds of levels. The Native American community, the African American community, slavery, all of that, we've played a role in that. And I think it's about time that this story comes out and we once again say, you know what, we had a role in that, and a really negative role in that. And it's time that we begin to address that role in our lives. It's a shift for us away from dehumanization to humanization. Because Jesus, even in the beginning, had that dehumanizing stance, and he called that woman and her people dogs, and we've called people who are not of our race or our ethnicity, of our religious belief, all kinds of names. But we have to begin to be willing to change, and that's one of the lessons of our lives and of this gospel, I think. And I believe in our society it's important for us to engage in relationships with people who are different in order to move dehumanization to mutual respect. I can say that only from my own experience, like until I got to the prison situation and actually engaged with imams, I had very little knowledge of the Muslim faith tradition, right? And most of what I had was inerrant. Most of it was wrong. But once I started to put names with faces and actually got to know people and actually got to know the priests, the imams of the Islamic community, my whole perspective has changed, and a deeper appreciation for what that faith has to bring to the world and how our actual faith journeys really merge in many ways. The third lesson might be this, I think, that our faith does not pride itself on certitude. Our faith reminds us that there's always room to grow. And I think that's an awesome thing that Jesus shared with us in changing his own mind. There's always room to grow. Just think, if it wasn't for this woman, the Christianity that you and I know, it would have never been born. Because this would have been an Israelite-only faith tradition. If she had not confronted Jesus, Christianity as we know it would have never been born. I think our lesson might be this: never believe that we can't change the world.